You are not in human resources anymore. I know your title might have human resources in it, but I can promise you, you are now moving beyond traditional HR to focus on the future of work and employee experience. And the challenge is, where do you as a CHRO go to connect with other peers just like you who are focused on that same thing? I've heard from dozens of CHROs that a lot of the communities out there are ridiculously expensive. You're spending $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 a year. When you go to conferences, there's hundreds, if not thousands of people, and you can't really connect with CHROs. You're constantly being upsold and cross-sold. You're being subjected to speeches and just lots of fluff. That's why I put together a brand new, intimate community for CHROs limited to 100. It's called Future of Work Leaders, and you can check it out at futureofworkleaders.com. And if you're interested in moving beyond traditional HR to focus on the future of work and employee experience, and you want to connect with other peers just like you who are doing that, but who are not spending a ton of money, they're not getting upsold or cross-sold, no speeches, no fluff, none of that kind of stuff, check out futureofworkleaders.com. You'll be joining CHROs from brands like Johnson & Johnson, Neiman Marcus, Dow, Waste Management, PNC Bank, Northrop Grumman, and dozens of others. Again, futureofworkleaders.com. I can promise you, you will be glad you checked it out, and I hope to see you in there. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Future Ready Leadership. My guest today, Eric Mosley, the CEO and founder of Workhuman, also the author/co-author of several books, including the crowdsourced performance review and The Power of Thanks. Eric, thank you for joining me.
It's great to be here, Jacob.
Well, first, for people who might not be familiar with your company and what you do, can you give us a little bit of background information, and also just how big is the organization? How many employees do you have there?
Yeah, so Workhuman, we have well over 1,000 employees. We are Workhuman. We like to think that we bring a little bit of humanity to the workplace for our customers, and we do that because we have a platform for companies to run recognition and appreciation programs. They allow employees to basically express gratitude for each other and the work that they do. And so when you have that kind of gratitude and appreciation flowing through a company, well, then everybody feels a little bit more connected. They feel like their human needs are being met, their need to be seen. And so Workhuman, that's essentially what we do. But now we do that all over the world. So we have a platform that is in 150 countries around the world. We have some of the world's largest organizations as customers. There's 7 million employees live on our platform, with companies from Cisco and Dell to Johnson & Johnson and Amgen and Merck, to industrial companies like GE, or financial services companies like Citigroup. 7 million employees. Wow. In 150 countries around the world. So we're pretty scaled on a global basis.
That's massive. You must have some pretty cool data inside your company.
Yeah. It is funny that as a company, we started as a recognition company, but we've kind of over time, the kind of secret value of our company has turned out to be the data that comes from all of that recognition activity, and I'm sure we'll get into that as we speak.
Yeah, and you mentioned Johnson & Johnson, so I have a CHRO group, and their CHRO is one of our members, so big fan of them. Shout out to J&J over there. So we're recording this. It's right around Employee Appreciation Day, so this is going to go out right around then, which is great. But yeah. I think one of the challenges, there used to be a time when employee appreciation used to be, the manager, the leader comes by your desk and says, thank you. Maybe you'll get a phone call. Maybe you'll get taken out to lunch, something like that. But now we live in this tech and AI driven world. And so how are you seeing employee appreciation and recognition and thanks evolving? And how do you still make it human, right? Because it's one thing to go over to one of your employees and say, thank you for the work that you're doing. It's another thing to kind of hit a like button or a heart, or give them you know what I mean? Like the human, how do you keep the humanness in all this?
Yeah. Well, it is interesting to see the evolution of recognition as a concept in a corporate environment since I started the company, over 20 years ago. And back then, and in the kind of decades before that, recognition was a very tactical exercise and very hierarchical. So, basically a manager would give an award, an appreciation award to maybe their favorite employee, and you'd have employee of the month,
Yeah.
So 10% of the organization would receive a thank you moment from a manager. Now, over the years, how that's changed and evolved, and I like to think that we've been at the forefront of kind of reinventing recognition as a social exercise and a strategic exercise. And the difference is now 90% of the organization will receive those thank you moments on a monthly or even weekly basis. So basically 90% will receive, probably 60 to 70% of an organization will give. They'll be the nominators, the givers of the recognition. And so that is a much different environment. It basically means that everybody is constantly expressing an opinion, a positive opinion on the work that their colleagues are doing. And so when it gets to that level, you're meeting the core human need for appreciation. So if you go back, 50 years of psychology will Maslow's hierarchy of human needs, for example, you'll see that a core human need is to feel seen and appreciated. When we work, when we do something, somebody has to notice that work or appreciate that work, or we kind of feel unfulfilled.
Yeah.
It's part of a core human need. And so recognition at the level of where everybody, and it's not just manager to subordinate, it's a completely social activity. So it's peer-to-peer, also, up and down the chain. So, employees will give their managers awards and vice versa. When you do that, you're basically blanketing the company in goodwill, and you're satisfying everybody's need to feel seen, and that is essentially that human component.
So, but how does the technology piece work, and how does it still feel human? Because part of me, just like hearing you talk, can it also be too much? You know what I mean? Like if you have, in your company, you said around 1,000 employees, but imagine you have a company of like 20, 30, 40, 50,000. Everyone has access to technology, and everyone's like, thank you, appreciate you, awards, right? And then at a certain point, does the meaning behind it go away, or how do you, right? Because it's very different if somebody like walks over to your desk, looks at you and says, hey, Eric, I know how hard you've been working on this. I just wanted to say I really appreciate it. But if that same person walks over to your desk every single day and says that same message, at a certain point, you're going to be like, okay, where is he or where is she? You know what I mean? Like it loses the impact. So how do you keep the human element in there? Like, what does that look like? And then how do you make sure it doesn't become, I don't know, saturated in goodwill?
Yeah, I think so. Ultimately, I think corporations normally have the opposite problem. In terms of
they do.
That they don't have enough. And the big challenge, I mean, we have customers with 10,000 employees. We have customers with 300, 400,000 employees, right? So massive global organizations. And it's the same for a 300,000 person company as it is for a 300 person company. They're all, I'm often asked by HR leaders or CEOs, like, will it work in my company? And my answer to that is always, well, do you hire humans? And if you do, it's going to work because it's a core human need. So the bigger problem to focus on is to get the levels up over, one award per person every 6 months. Like that's where I see the vast majority of problems. And so we work with companies there's a whole strategy and an onboarding, a marketing and a training campaign that has to be rolled out across an organization to get the adoption and throughput up to a level where you're starting to have an impact on the culture of the company. As we do that, some companies go, beyond the targets that we would set, and some companies never reach those targets, but they all strive to have more. I have yet, in 25 years, to have a CHRO come to me and say, you know what, we've too much positivity in our company. Is there any way we could dial that back?
Turn it down.
It literally never happens. But you touch on another point that is very pertinent here, which is what is recognition and what is good recognition? So is the attaboy, pat on the back, is that what we mean by recognition? And sophistication in this exercise is to understand how you can craft an actual thank you moment. It's not just, an emoji or a sending somebody an emoticon or a thank you, Bob kind of message. We structure our platform, the product, to kind of get out of people an articulation of how they feel from what they've witnessed. And through that exercise, we give guidelines to individuals on how to give a great recognition moment. And there's research to back all of that up. So, for example, recognition moments have much more lasting impact if they have specificity in the message. So if they actually mention the key piece of performance that they're thanking the person for, and they kind of articulate their feelings about that, it lands much deeper to the receiver. And then that receiver is much more likely in the next, employee satisfaction survey or engagement survey or things like that. They're much more likely to say that they feel recognized and they feel that they have worth in the organization. If you just give them, we call it, emoji recognition.
Yeah.
If you just give somebody an emoji, it doesn't work. It like the very first one you get can be okay, but you get a third one. And then it's kind of like it's just not it doesn't land. It doesn't have impact.
Oh, yeah.
So a part of this journey is teaching the organization how to do great recognition. Now, the other side of that as well is that when you do that, you create more data. The message, the information density in the recognition moment is deeper. So if you just say, thank you, Bob, well, there's not a lot of deep information in that. But if you've written 2 paragraphs where you've really explained what Bob did to make you do this, to make you say thank you, why you were inspired to do it, when machine learning and NLP looks at that message, it can find real nuggets about performance and all sorts of different things about the work that's ongoing in the company. So there's a whole science around the type of recognition and the quantities that have to be met so you get the return on investment.
Okay. Yeah, and I'm really curious to dive into some of the data in just a minute, because I'm very curious to hear what you learn. But just hearing you talk and some of these attaboy things, are you familiar with the show on TV, Apple TV, Severance?
Yeah. I haven't watched the second season, only the first one.
Okay, but you remember even in the first one when one of the employees, and by the way, people should watch it, it's a great show. But you remember that when somebody does a good job, they show up to work and they get these like ridiculous recognition, like balloons, or you'll get like a pineapple that's in the shape of your face, or you'll get like a finger trap, or somebody will draw a picture of you. And it's these ridiculous like awards, but they get excited about it, right? Because they're in this cubicle where they're isolated. There's no other people there, so they get like a pineapple that looks like them, and they're like, "Oh my God, this is great." But that wouldn't work in today's workplace. If somebody was doing a great job and you gave them like a fruit basket or a piece of pineapple, they'd be like, gee, thanks.
Well, the number one kind of the number one most important thing is authenticity in the sentiment. So if I'm thanking you for such an excellent podcast experience, I have to be kind of specific. I have to be authentic. I have to use language that you will receive as real. That it's not just performative. And if it's real and it has that authenticity, you will, whether you want to or not, you will be affected by that, because another human being has expressed true gratitude for you. It's a very powerful human emotion. Now, the other side of that actually is the giving of that recognition moment actually also has a lot of power. And in fact, it has an equal amount of power. So in that instance, when I give you the thank you moment, that award, and I have to express myself in that paragraph, I'm putting myself in a kind of a gratitude mindset.
Yeah.
Because I have to kind of articulate a good thing. I have to articulate why I appreciate you. And that's, you've heard, people talk about gratitude journals and, all that kind of stuff. The reason why they work is it changes your mindset for the rest of the day into looking at, a more positive view on the people around you. It's the exact same with recognition. When I give an award, I put myself into a different mindset where I'm now looking at you in a more positive sense. And our natural inclination sometimes is to go to the negative. So we see, for example, that people who give a certain amount of awards, they also have higher retention in a company than the people who just who receive the awards. It's they feel more connected just as much as the people who receive the thank you sentiment. So it's very powerful both ways.
Interesting. Okay, so and I want to unpack that in a minute. The other thing, so I wrote a book fairly recently called Leading with Vulnerability. And one of the things that I found, because I asked a lot of CEOs, what makes you feel most vulnerable at work and why? And to me, also giving recognition and receiving recognition is an act of vulnerability. And a lot of people don't see the receiving act as being vulnerable, but it is. I mean, giving praise, it's clear why it's vulnerable, because you have to get out of your comfort zone. You have to let people know how much you appreciate it. And that can be very vulnerable. But at the same time, I think of like my dad. And, my dad's the type of person where if you give him a compliment, he won't let you know how much the compliment is meaningful to him, right? So you look at him and you'll say, Dad, you look great. You've been exercising. You lost a little bit of weight. And instead of saying, oh, thank you so much, I've been working really hard, he'd be like, what do you mean I look the same? Like, no, Dad, you look great. You've been exercising. You lost some weight. Why would I look any different? Like you know what I mean? Like
he sounds Irish.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Russian with Georgian, I should say, but yeah, similar. So in other words, like there's vulnerability, and sometimes I struggle with this. If somebody gives me a compliment, I'll say thank you, but really I'm thinking like, wow, that's awesome. Thank you so much for saying that. But like expressing how much a compliment means or how much an award means is also an act of vulnerability, but a lot of people are not comfortable with it. So how do you have any advice or suggestions? Have you seen that as a challenge with employees on just, embracing the vulnerability in there?
Yeah, well, sometimes we'll also find that people will express whether they like to receive this kind of recognition in a private, way or a public way. So, some people are not comfortable, for example, in the office if people call people over and say, "Hey, George did an amazing thing."
Everybody clap for George.
Yeah. And George is having a little quiet heart attack there. But so some people do have that different aspect in a technology driven platform where this giving and receiving becomes kind of commonplace. People primarily receive them first alone. They get a notification on their phone or they get an email. They go and they view it. Colleagues will sometimes congratulate them and comment on that award, so that it kind of sometimes can almost go viral. But in general, and we do this in every country in the world. So often people will say, "Yeah, but different cultures, they don't want kind of recognition." Actually, it's just not true. They may not want a banner parade in the office, but everyone, it's part of the human psyche if you work hard, somebody needs to notice it. You might be embarrassed if somebody makes a fuss of you, but there are virtually zero people who don't appreciate that people notice that they do good work. I remember many years ago when we were first even starting on this journey, and we probably had 20 employees, and there was a person who worked for us, and I knew she was trying to improve her public speaking, and she was doing, Toastmasters outside of work, and she was working real hard to get better at public speaking. And she did an internal presentation, and it was great. It worked really well. And so I sent her a thank you. I sent her an award, a recognition award, and I said, "I know you've been working on this. Well, I want you to know that it worked, and you came across amazing and blah, blah." I could see across, we had a very small office, there's only 20 of us. I could see across the cubes, she burst into tears and walked out of the office because it got right. There was a pent up tension in her from all the work that she'd done. And then she performed And she didn't really know whether people knew the amount of work that she put in to get to master that. And so when she got, in that case, me and as CEO, when she got that confirmation that it had been noticed, it was like a release. It was a big release. And that kind of emotion doesn't often happen in work.
Yeah.
And when it does, you have deep ties between people, and you have deep ties between them and the company and the culture. So it's one of the things that is, when they talk about bringing humanity to the workplace or making work more human, there's two aspects to it. The first is, as I said, the need to feel recognized. The second aspect is to help propagate deeper relationships between employees. And every single recognition moment deepens the relationship between those two employees just a little bit. And when it happens thousands of times, the relationship capital in the company gets deeper. The foundation of relationships gets deeper. And that means there's basically a community. The community is stronger. And that's why we see time and time again, retention goes up. And it's because people feel a deeper connection to their peers. And they don't want to leave that kind of peer group, that little community of colleagues and friends that they have in work. So recognition does that as well. And that was obviously very powerful in the whole hybrid work environment or working from home, where culture and community decayed through all of the, that time period where people just retreated to their home offices.
Yeah.
And so recognition was a key tool to try and build deeper relationships and connection.
I'm really curious about some of the data. So one of the things that you mentioned is people who give recognition or awards tend to stay at the company longer, which I suppose makes sense because you're so invested in the company that you're a part of, you're recognizing those around you. And so I see that connection. But when you looked at, I think you said 7 million employees.
Yeah.
When you looked at the data across the board, is there anything else that particularly stood out that was interesting?
So the amount of insights that you can get from recognition data is ultimate. It's kind of limitless, right? So on the retention side, for example, we've seen in every industry and every job role, we've seen that employees that receive 0 awards, so 0 recognition moments, they have a certain amount of turnover. Let's say it's 15%.
Okay.
Employees that have maybe 5 awards per year from colleagues, their turnover in that cohort of employees in that company, their turnover is halved. So it could be 7 or 8% you lose. When you get up to like 10 to 12 awards per year, which is kind of once a month, it can be down to 3% turnover in that cohort of employees. And that curve, which is basically like this kind of decaying curve of retention, is being reduced as recognition quantity goes up. That is the same whether you are a software engineer, whether you work in a lab in a pharmaceutical, whether you work in Japan or India or Switzerland or New York. The slope of that curve can be a little bit different in some job roles, but the shape of it is the same. If you're in a higher cohort, if you're in a cohort of employees that have received more awards, you just feel more connected, and you literally then have a lot less propensity to want to leave. And so that's fascinating. And what, another aspect of that that's really fascinating is I'm constantly, over the years, very often I'd get the question of, well, is that going to work for our higher paid employees? Like maybe a bank might say for their traders. Well, our traders, they're not going to want these little, $50 awards from their colleagues. They earn millions of dollars a year. And the answer again to that is actually, yes, they do. Because number one, they're human. Well, we think they're human, but yeah, they're human. And number two, they have a core need for somebody to say that they're doing a good job, no matter how much they earn. And they respond to the emotion in the thank you moment, not the value, let's say. So that's retention.
It's a quick question on that before you jump to the next one. So is there kind of a law of diminishing returns where after you get past that, like once a month, I think is reasonable. But for example, do you have anybody that's giving them out, I don't know, once a week? And do you see sort of a drop off, or is once a month kind of like the optimal?
I think what we would advise our customers is that if they get to maybe 10, 11 a year, that gives them a lot of return on investment.
Okay.
And that works out to be kind of, because there's monetary value attached to these awards. That turns out to be like 0.5% to 1% of payroll. So if you have payroll where you have base salary and benefits and insurance, but if you put 1 cent out of every dollar into a recognition program, and basically you give that money, you give it to the employees to give to each other, you'll end up at about 10 to 12 awards per person. Now, some people might only get 2 and some people might get 20, but the average is about 10 to 12.
Okay.
That's enough to create a big jump in engagement, so energy levels in the company, a big jump in employee satisfaction, but also a critical mass in the data so that you can actually rely on the statistics. You can rely on the data for the insights.
And then the second question on that is, so I'm assuming there have to be some rules or structure in how to give recognition the right way. And I thought maybe we can unpack that a little bit. So one of the ones that you alluded to earlier is that it needs to be authentic. So if I just go to one of my employees and once a month I just say, hey, great job, congratulations, here's $50, I would assume that might not be as impactful. So can you give us, whether somebody's using technology or whether they're doing it face-to-face or by hand, are there certain rules of recognition that you think everybody needs to put into place? For example, authenticity was one. I think you mentioned specificity of what the employee did to deserve that recognition. Anything else that you would add into that list?
Well, a big part of it is the kind of the strategy around recognition. Like, what are you trying to get out of it? And a lot of big companies, what they're trying to do is they're trying to first we'll get to data and AI and stuff like that in a second maybe. But one of the primary reasons they're doing it is they want to embed the values of their company in the psyche of their employees. It's kind of like culture management.
Yeah.
If they want to highlight innovation in their company as a topic, if they want to highlight safety, maybe they have plants and they want to highlight safety. They use recognition to make it top of mind. So they'll structure the program, they'll force all of the recognition that happens in the company to go through one place, like one, for example, platform, and then they'll funnel that activity to link it to certain values. So that could be like innovation or safety or quality or other things. And if you can do that mental gymnastics of getting the employees to associate the behavior that they've witnessed that's inspired them to say thank you with one of the company values, you can literally then grab any employee and ask them, what's our company values? And they'll be able to tell you off the top of their head. So this concept of just putting it on a poster in the canteen on the wall, our values are innovation and quality. If you can get them thinking about it and expressing gratitude through the lens of the values, you will embed them in the psyche of all of the employees in the company. And then after that, the company has to figure out what it's trying to achieve, if it's beyond that, if there's more. And they have to structure the recognition programs to meet that.
Yeah. What about just on an individual level? So that's kind of like company strategy. But let's say I'm an individual and I'm trying to figure out how do I recognize or say thank you to somebody on my team. I don't know, maybe I'm a leader in some capacity. Yeah. What are kind of the criteria besides authenticity and specificity that I should be thinking of before recognizing or rewarding someone?
I think the one of the top ones is the speed. So you need to do it as close to the behavior as possible. Because another kind of downstream benefit of recognition is if people are thanked for a certain behavior, they're much more likely to repeat that behavior.
Yeah.
So if somebody, you have a problem with certain kind of processes, if they get it right and they get an award for that from a colleague or from a manager, they're much more likely to then to adhere to that process again the next time. But if there's too much of a gap, like, so for example, if if it's like, a month or a few weeks, then the connection is lost and you don't get that kind of return. So kind of timeliness, the specificity in terms of really articulating what it's for, but also articulating how you feel about it, like its impact on you, like, so what, the result of that kind of behavior.
The vulnerability.
Yeah. And then now in the normal recognition programs, there will be an approval mechanism. A manager or two managers might have to approve the award. So you linking it to some sort of company, a lot of times linking it to some sort of company objective is also beneficial.
Over the past few years, I've written a lot of books on leadership, the future of work, and employee experience. In fact, one of the best-selling books I ever wrote came out in 2017 called The Employee Experience Advantage. And now I'm working on a brand new employee experience book where I'm interviewing 100 chief human resource officers at companies around the world. And I keep hearing from all these CHROs that they want a new type of peer community where they can connect with CHROs focused specifically on the future of work and employee experience. They don't want it to be expensive. They don't want upselling. They don't want cross-selling. They don't want fluff. They don't want speeches. They just want strategy and insights and real-time conversation. If that sounds like something you are interested in, then check out futureofworkleaders.com and you can join other brands such as Johnson & Johnson, Neiman Marcus, Waste Management, Dow, Lego, and dozens of others. Check out futureofworkleaders.com. I promise you, you will be glad you did. And then before we touch on AI, kind of one more follow-up to that. How do you balance the recognition versus reprimanding when people do things wrong, right? So it's kind of like I have two little kids. I have a 4-year-old and an 8-year-old. And sometimes I catch myself doing this too, where I might reprimand them for doing the wrong behavior as opposed to recognizing them doing the right behavior. So today, for example, my wife is out of town. She's speaking in a customer experience event. And so, I'm getting the two kids ready by myself. And my little 4-year-old son, Noah, he did a great job today. So I said, great job, buddy. You helped daddy, you got in the car. And I caught myself doing that. And I'm like, usually I'm the opposite. I'm kind of like, why are you not getting ready? Why are you not helping? You got to do a better job. I'm focusing on the things that they might be doing wrong and how they can be doing better instead of recognizing them for the right behavior. So how do you balance that? And I don't know if you've seen any kind of relationship there, because I feel like it's very easy to focus on the bad behaviors and the improvement, and it's much harder to focus on what somebody's doing right.
Yeah, I think that's at the heart of why people want to implement recognition programs. I mean, a lot of times the catalyst for a company to come to us is they've just heard from their employee base that they their latest employee satisfaction survey has shown that everybody feels like
everyone's screwing up, everyone's terrible.
Yeah, everyone's terrible. The company's terrible. We had we've heard some really negative attributes of cultures out there. There's a lot of toxic cultures in the world, a lot more than people think. And so I think the first kind of catalyst for why they do it is that they have a deficit of positive reinforcement, because the human psyche does tend to kind of get drawn to the nitpicking, and the kind of negative.
That. I'm terrible with that.
Yeah,
seriously, I'm more like in my personal life, just with my wife, with my kids, I can be very critical and nitpicky, and I sometimes catch myself doing that. I'm like, what the hell are you doing?
Yeah, but I think that's the human condition, though. Yeah. I that's not unusual, and so if that becomes writ large across an organization and is unfettered, then that's a problem. But it is not. It's not abnormal. It's normal. And so I think one of the reasons. So very often. Well, I wouldn't say very often, but once in a while, a HR person who's talking to us might say, "Well, we want to add in. Can we add in the ability to give negative feedback We want to be able to give negative feedback as well as all this positive feedback. And our answer to that is no. and the reason for that is it's not to say that the negative feedback is not useful. It is useful and it is necessary, especially in a HR environment and in a work environment. But the recognition program has to be an oasis of positivity in a company. You can't dilute that. Like, you don't want to get a notification from the recognition program and worry that it could be positive or negative. It needs to be always positive from this channel. It's not the only channel, though. Yeah. So negative feedback should come from a different channel. So, in most cases, we would say, negative feedback needs to be probably verbal and in, physically proximate. People need to sit down and give some feedback on what can be improved so that they can have a heart-to-heart conversation about it. But just making it frictionless to throw off negative feedback, that's a route to a very toxic environment. So we very deliberately don't allow anything like that because, as I said, humans do gravitate towards that. It's kind of natural.
It's funny that you've had customers ask you to enable that. Do you ever find that people get pretty sneaky as you're looking at some of the data where people are giving a recognition award or a trophy and they're like, well, I was disappointed that you did this, but you did a great job with that. Like, do you ever find people sneaking that in there?
Yeah, it's a very it's a very interesting area because people can be passive aggressive. Recognition awards, and they can also have microaggressions in there, so we developed a tool called the Inclusion Advisor. So and it uses kind of NLP, a little AI kind of tool. And when people write their message, they write a paragraph, they hit the Inclusion Advisor and it'll underline problematic words and phrases. So if it spots things like microaggressions or double negatives or, kind of faint praise that's actually more negative than it is positive, it'll highlight it and it'll just say to the user, you might want to rethink this because it could be taken as a negative. And what we found is that something like 60% of the times that highlights something, the person actually goes in and fixes the language because they didn't realize that they were doing it. And over time, then it's kind of like teachable moments. They become more aware of how they are speaking. And we see all sorts of like bias in that, like, gender bias, kind of race bias, like the whole gamut of human frailty is in those messages. And something like this is one of the human dividends of AI is that AI can look at that text and analyze it and point it out to be fixed. And then the human gets a second chance to say, yeah, you know what? I shouldn't say that. I'll say it a different way. And it can teach over time.
So some of that stuff freaks me out sometimes. Well, because you mentioned something like this, what did you say? The human frailty, I think you said, right?
Yeah.
And so sometimes I wonder, and I'm curious to get your thoughts on this. So sometimes I wonder that that's actually good to show the human frailty, the mistakes, So I remember, for example, like I'm in a WhatsApp group with a bunch of my friends, and then we were talking about some stuff, and I don't know how many people are in there, like 20 or 30, and we were talking about something, and somebody put a message in the WhatsApp group, but at the end of the message, he forgot to delete. Like if you put something into ChatGPT, at the end of it, it'll say, "This is a message that has a warm and friendly tone." And so he put this message into ChatGPT and he sent it to the WhatsApp group, but he forgot to delete that part at the bottom. And so now we all knew that he went into ChatGPT to just text the message to the group.
Yeah.
And so, of course, everybody was making fun of him for that, for, not having to do that.
Yeah.
But how do you balance the being okay with human frailty piece versus stripping it down to the point where a message that might have mistakes, and God knows how many messages I've sent that had mistakes that maybe said this or that, but they're me, and if somebody comes to me and says, hey, I was upset by that or that hurt my feelings, I have no problem apologizing and acknowledging that. So how do you, because I think this is a very interesting challenge and balance with AI,
Yeah.
it's, are we going to get to a point where we strip out the human, the frailty, the emotion, the mistake, the
Yeah.
whatever it might be? Like it reminds me a little bit of what was that movie with Christian Bale? I don't know if you saw it. It was years ago, where basically everybody takes these pills to make them not have emotion.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Somebody watching this will remember it.
Yeah.
But, like that's my fear, right? Are we going to get to a
Yeah.
point where our communication is going to be so perfectly balanced, so
Yeah.
neutral, so devoid of
Yeah.
emotion, so like
Yeah.
stripped down that we lose the humanness in there? Like, is that a worry? Am I just being nuts?
No, I think that's a worry, especially for just in general in computing.
Yeah.
In terms of writing emails and documents and in recognition award text. What I described in terms of the inclusion advisor really just points out something that could be problematic, and the person can fix it or they don't. As I said, 60% of the time they do, and so they've kind of learned a little bit about themselves as well. And it's something that they probably didn't know. I mean, at the end of the day, we're all kind of hopelessly biased human beings, and it's one of the things we've been able to discover with the data around recognition programs. I'll give you an example. Hundreds of millions of recognition moments on our platform across the whole world with 7 million employees, as I said, 150 countries. If you just look at it from a gender perspective, women actually receive just a little higher quantity of awards than men. But they receive, across the whole world, they receive 12% less value in their recognition moments than men do.
Okay.
And in fact, if you just look at women giving, so you strip out the men givers, just women giving, women also give women 12% less than they give men. And so this is the kind of science of bias, and the unfortunate reality is we can be told we got to look out for bias and we got to look out for microaggressions and things like that, but we're really bad at it. And even when we go into something knowing that we're bad at it, when you look at the data later, the patterns are undeniable. And we also see that kind of pattern for race. There's literally a hierarchy of races in terms of when you allow millions of people to say thank you and attach a monetary value to it, they give the most to white people, and then it goes down as you go around the world in different nationalities and different races. So that's the reality. That's what happens. But that's it. One benefit of being able to see that is now you can act on it. And now you can, like if you're a CHRO, the head of HR in a company, now you can have the measurement to be able to change those biases and educate the user base, and then over time see if you're actually making a difference. And just make people take a moment to think about, why did I pick the $50 award for this person when for the exact same thing last week I gave a $100 award to a man? Why did I do that? If you just point it out, people will then start to self-correct, and that 12% will become 8% over time, and maybe 4% over time.
Yeah, I'd be really interested to learn. I don't know if you guys do this as well. Kind of like the 1 or 2 levels deeper behind. Like, are there explanations for this? Is it more men or women at a company, or more women in certain roles, or more white? You know what I mean? Like, is there?
Yeah.
Is there like a level or 2 deeper that helps explain any of this stuff?
Yeah. Well, so when we did that research, we have a research arm called Workhuman IQ, and they go deep on all of this. And basically, they kind of normalize the data so that it's taking the same job roles, the same titles, all of that kind of thing. Literally, there is a deep bias within all of us. And if we are just expressing ourselves, it comes out in very subtle ways. Not all the time, not every time, but there will be a deficit when you take a large enough sample, and that's a societal level issue, not necessarily a kind of company level issue, or even a personal issue. It's just something that's ingrained in us. But as I said, once you know it exists, once you can measure it, you can influence and then fix sometimes the language and fix and obviously that kind of equity in the awarding. But it does rule out the job roles, the seniority, the type of it baselines all of that.
Interesting. I'm gonna have to check that out. Workhuman IQ. Okay, I'm gonna make a bookmark that later. I'm always just super really interested in kind of the data aspect of it, because I try to read a lot of reports and studies, and they're like there's so much out there that it becomes very difficult to kind of keep up with it, with everything that's going on. So I'm really really curious about that stuff. But kind of going back to the AI theme, are you worried about AI? Because there are some people who are very pessimistic. AI is going to replace a lot of jobs. AI is going to have its own bias in there by people who program it. And there are other people, I think it was JD Vance, who was recently at the AI summit in France, and he was talking about how the current administration is not scared of AI. They don't view it as replacing jobs. They view it as putting people first, and they view AI as increasing productivity and kind of augmenting human roles. But then you hear the exact opposite argument of like, this guy's crazy, we're getting to a jobs apocalypse. Where are you on kind of the AI debate? Especially in the next 1, 2, 3 years, where we talk about sentient intelligence. There's a lot that could happen, and the debates around it are quite interesting. So I'm curious to hear where you land on all of this.
Yeah, so I tend to be. I would say, I'm not one of the doom and gloom kind of, jobs apocalypse people.
You don't strike me as a doom and gloom kind of guy.
I am a realist in terms of, I think there are job roles that will be diminished in terms of quantity. So, at the lower end of the scale of kind of knowledge workers, there will be where you used to need 10 of them, you might need 4 of them in 3 years, right? So that's most definitely a net less amount of those jobs. However, AI is going to bring its own need for jobs and roles into companies. It will create a whole segment of labor that people will have to bring into their companies, mostly related to AI. I mean, infrastructure, data processing, all of these things. There is so I think it's like when, in the 50s and 60s, when people, when the computers were starting to become prevalent, and if you looked into a bank, they might have a sea of people doing data entry. And the worry with computers was it was going to automate all that, and they were all going to be out of the job, and that was a jobs apocalypse. Well, the reality is they were all out of the job, but there was no jobs apocalypse, because the computer kind of mega trend created a whole industry around computing, right? So you kind of swapped some very low end jobs for some very higher end jobs in the economy at a society level. I think something similar will happen here. You'll find that there'll be certain things like customer service. A lot of customer service queries will be able to be handled by AI agents. But you will need people who can put those things in place and monitor them and kind of manage them. And you didn't need that before. There could be a issue around greater inequality in society. And the reason I say that is that the lower end of the knowledge economy, the kind of drudgery and the admin kind of level of knowledge work, they may be kind of disintermediated. Their wage pressure will be actually more, will go down. Wages will go down at that end. At the higher end, people who can leverage AI, who even manage AI, who can do great marketing jobs and coding jobs with AI, their value will actually go up. So what you'll see is there'll be wage upward mobility at the top and wage downward mobility at the bottom, which means a big kind of gaping hole in the middle. So that is one worry, and I think governments and policymakers have to think about that. A bigger aspect of it as well, though, is people. I don't think it's productive to say that we shouldn't have AI because it might affect employment. for one, as I just said, I think we will still have the opportunity to have full employment in the economy. But for two, this is happening whether you like it or not. So you have to lean in and you have to get ahead of it. And you have to, and certainly if you're a company, so, if you're a company, you compete in a marketplace with other companies. If you're the one that doesn't leverage all of these technologies, you're done. Your competitors are going to swamp you. That's going to be the end. So it's incumbent upon companies, it's incumbent upon countries to lean in and be brave with these technologies, because we have to fulfill their promise, because it's going to be fulfilled regardless of whether we want to or not, and we have to be able to influence it and get ahead of it.
Yeah, I think the next few years will be very interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, we're on what, like ChatGPT 4? They're talking about ChatGPT 5. I mean, it's hard to
Yeah.
imagine, my 8-year-old daughter, when she
Yeah.
starts getting more substantial homework assignments, we're probably going to be at ChatGPT 5 or 6 or 7. Who
Yeah.
knows?
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so are you, and I tend to lean in that camp as well. I see a lot of
Mm.
potential and promise of AI. But, when I talk to a lot of CHROs in a group that I run, I find that a lot of them are very cautiously optimistic for a
Yeah.
number of reasons. Number one, AI is obviously only as good as the data that you feed it. And I know you've talked
Yeah.
about this as well. And one of the challenges that I've seen when it comes to things like upskilling or predicting talent or anything like that, I've heard both good stories and bad stories. I've had some companies say, yeah, we used AI to predict who should be good in this role or when somebody's going to leave, and we were able to step in and it was amazing. And then I've had other companies, other CHROs say, well, we trusted the AI and it made these predictions for us and we implemented it and it was terribly wrong.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I hear the same thing with upskilling and reskilling. There are companies that
Yeah.
say, well, we want to use AI to upskill and reskill employees. But the problem is that AI only has access to data that you feed it. So if I'm listening to a podcast, I read a book in my personal time, I get mentored and coached by somebody outside of the software platform, AI has no idea about any of this stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's this really interesting challenge between like how accurate can AI be in certain areas?
Yeah.
How much do we trust it?
Yeah.
Curious to hear your thoughts on, because it's a very interesting challenge, right? Blending the I guess the subjectivity of a leader, of what they see and what they observe and how they interact with you, versus data that AI might give, and how to blend those two to make the best possible decisions.
Yeah, I think, you hit the nail on the head there in terms of the big issue is the quality of the data that feeds into AI. I think Rand Corporation released a research paper last year that said 80% of AI projects fail.
Oh, that's a huge number.
And that's a huge number. And in the paper, they talked about how organizations complain that they found it hard to get to good data to train the models. Now, if you look at it, so you have to understand the kind of provenance and where the data comes from and how you can generate data to inform AI. Obviously, we're kind of deep in all of that with the AI technology products that we've released. But a big part of it is we have this data which is kind of unsurpassed in terms of the kind of intelligence that's in it. So the information density. If you have a person who has just described their colleague's work and everything about that work, and they've made comments about that person's skills, and if you have now thousands of those comments, you can use AI to catalog who collaborates with who are the top performers, who's most influential in the company, who has informal power in the company.
You can calculate all that just from the recognitions that go back and forth.
As long as the recognitions that go back and forth have an articulated point of view, that they have, that there's, a paragraph or two of text associated with them. There will be, if you use NLP, you can find out, does this person think this other person is good at, public speaking, or are they good at critical thinking, or it will be in there. And if there's enough critical mass of that data, so you're basically, in that kind of an environment, it's almost like in intelligence as a utility in a company.
Yeah.
Talent and performance, intelligence at the fingertips of all managers. Because what what you do with that recognition data is you're capturing the opinions of all of the people, all the brains in the company, all of their opinions about their colleagues. You're capturing it all. That's 10,000 opinions potentially. And you're distilling that in an AI technology so that any one of them, or managers or leaders, can go in and ask the collective opinion of the entire company on who's the most influential person in marketing.
Yeah.
Who's the best presenter in finance? And literally it'll answer that question because it synthesized it from all of those people. So that's where AI can be just outstandingly kind of, a productivity enhancement for companies.
That's pretty cool. So it sounds like what you're saying, AI can do a really good job of reading between the lines and making connections that maybe people can't make, which I think is interesting there as well. So there's a lot of cool potential.
Yeah, it's incredible. And when these kind of technologies become more prevalent and they're kind of adopted across all companies, the world of work changes kind of forever. People will be matched with work much more forensically. The skills that they have there'll be knowledge about that. And then their particular skills will be matched to particular work kind of projects, and the productivity in the company will basically go up. There'll be less kind of inefficiency in the talent system.
So you think we're going to get to a point where it'll be almost like real time? Because I almost think about like updating a LinkedIn profile. Like, how many people update their LinkedIn profile? Like, like I don't ever remember updating my LinkedIn profile with like the skills section. And a lot of these AI tools that predict employees and roles, they depend on employees going in there and like, what skills do you have? Or if you take a course, it has to be connected to the AI tool. Do you think one day we're going to get to a point where it'll be almost real time somehow, where AI will know what you're doing outside of the platform? Like, how would you envision that happening one day?
Well, I think that's kind of exactly what's going to happen. There's a lot of skepticism about self-proclaimed skills.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Because people, they say they put a positive slant on their, because they're marketing themselves basically.
I could say I'm a finance expert. I'm a whatever. You could put whatever you want.
Yeah, put whatever you want, and then it goes straight into the AI engine, and it's kind of suddenly now it becomes fact. But the reality is, it's not necessarily fact.
Yeah, and then they're like, "Whoa, Jacob, you should be CEO. You have all these skills. Clearly, you should take Eric's job. Let's pitch the board, right?" And it's like stuff that I'm just putting in there.
So what you need a counterbalance to that, and the counterbalance is the crowd, the wisdom of crowds, where you're garnering some of that information from the ongoing narrative that happens in a company. Now, some of that can be an email or Slack or recognition awards, but you're collecting fragments of language that together paint a more holistic view of departments, teams, and individuals, and then it balances the self-proclaimed version. But you have to realize it's a balance.
Yeah.
It's not that one is the absolute truth. None of it on its own is the absolute truth. It's a holistic picture together that starts to get closer to the truth.
Yeah, I think that's going to be the interesting challenge: is how do you bring that puzzle together with kind of the human side and the AI side, because I agree with you. I think there's tremendous potential. So it'll be very cool to see how that evolves and develops over time. I can't believe the hour has already gone by so quickly. I feel like we could be talking about this stuff for a lot longer. Especially, the AI stuff and the data piece, I find just so interesting and fascinating for how it's going to shape work going forward. But why don't you let people know, where can they learn? Where can they go to learn more about you, your company? I mean, if you're putting any of these reports out there, I know you're on LinkedIn as well, but where can people see any of these insights or things that you guys are working on?
Well, you can go to workhuman.com, and workhuman.com, from there they can see all of that research and everything about the company. And obviously I founded the company 25 years ago, so I'm kind of inextricably linked with all of that. And my LinkedIn profile, Eric Mosley, easy to find.
25 years. Wow. Congratulations. That's super cool. Maybe one day I'll be talking to like a AI avatar version of you. You'll be relaxing
Yeah.
on a beach somewhere and I'll be interviewing the AI Eric Mosley.
Yeah. Hopefully.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Oh, that's the idea. Right? You want to replace yourself with a Eric AI chat agent.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. Yeah.
well, hopefully that won't happen.
Yeah.
But you never know. Eric, thank you so much for taking time out of your day. I really appreciate it. And I hope everyone goes to check out your site. You're on LinkedIn as well. You put stuff on there too, right? If people go to your LinkedIn?
Yeah.
Okay.
All there. Yeah.
So Eric
Yeah.
Mosley on LinkedIn, and you can check out his books as well. So thank you everyone for tuning in, and I will see all of you next time. Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of Future Ready Leadership. If you want to get access to more content on how you can become future ready, make sure to subscribe to the newsletter. It's thefutureorganization.com/newsletter. And if you enjoyed this episode, please send it to somebody who you would like to see become a better leader. Thanks for listening or watching, and I will see you next time.